welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the fascinating and, frankly, pretty complex evolution of Bodh Gaya. We're looking at how a quiet village transformed into the bustling epicenter of global Buddhism. You know, we hear a lot about World Heritage Sites, but we rarely stop to look closely at what actually happens when an ancient, deeply spiritual place suddenly becomes a massive modern destination.
So it all boils down to this central question. How do you actually protect a living sanctuary? We're exploring this immense modern tug-of-war between preserving an ancient sacred heritage and, well, accommodating massive tourism development. When a site is meant to be a quiet refuge for spiritual enlightenment, but it's suddenly tasked with handling millions of international tourists, something's got to give, right? How do you freeze a site in time to preserve it while it still remains an active, breathing community?
All right, Section 1, the cradle of Buddhism.
Okay, to really grasp the incredibly high stakes today, we first have to ground ourselves in the sheer spiritual and historical weight of this place. This isn't just some old building. It is literally the focal point for one of the world's major religions. Let's trace this epic 2,500-year journey. It starts way back in the 6th century BCE. That's the exact time Siddhartha Gautama is said to have attained enlightenment. Fast forward to the 3rd century BCE, and Emperor Ashoka establishes the very first temple there. Now, here's a surprising twist. Around the 11th century CE, Buddhism's presence in India actually dwindled, and Bodh Gaya was largely lost to time and fell into disrepair. It wasn't until archaeological discoveries in the 19th and 20th centuries that it was fully restored, which ultimately led to its inscription as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2002.
A really crucial piece of the puzzle here is understanding the term Mahabodhi. This word anchors everything we're going to talk about today regarding this temple complex. Mahabodhi doesn't just refer to a physical building. It translates to great awakening or great insight. So it refers to the exact Bodhi tree under which Siddhartha meditated for sure, but it also represents the metaphysical experience of enlightenment itself. It's this incredibly powerful duality of physical geography that represents a state of mind.
Moving right along, Section 2, a global heritage site.
So how exactly did this historic cradle evolve into a monumental site claiming global significance? Well, the temple itself is an absolute marvel. Standing 52 meters, that's roughly 235 feet tall, this ancient brick structure, originally established by Emperor Ashoka, survived centuries of severe weather, ravages, and total abandonment. Yet it stands today as a stunning visual testament to ancient Indian brick architecture. And of course, it houses the surviving sacred Bodhi tree, making it the undeniable center of the Buddhist universe.
But here's the thing. It's not just a static museum. It's a living, breathing masterpiece. The complex features these exquisitely carved lateritic stone pillars and intricate Vedic motifs that narrate the Buddha's life. And what's truly staggering is its reach. The architectural style here created a massive ripple effect, directly influencing art and temple design across the entire Asian continent. You can literally see echoes of Bodh Gaya in iconic places like Borobudur in Indonesia or Angkor Wat in Cambodia. And through all of this, it remains an active, living place of worship today.
Which brings us to Section 3, pilgrims, tourists, and economics.
Because, when UNESCO slaps a World Heritage label on something, the world actually shows up. So let's shift gears and look at the explosive economic and human impact of modern travel to this site. When you dig into the hard data from the 2014 to 2015 tracking year, it reveals a massive, really asymmetrical global footprint. The numbers are completely dominated by South and East Asian visitors. We're talking over 160,000 from South Asia and nearly 30,000 from East Asia, compared to just a few thousand from North America and Europe combined. This tells us that the vast majority of these visitors are cultural pilgrims, people who are already intimately familiar with the religion and the site before they even pack their bags. Now, this massive influx creates a really stark contrast. We're basically looking at two completely competing visions of Bodh Gaya going head-to-head. On one side, you have the ancient concept of Buddhist detachment and peaceful meditation, which is, let's remember, the very reason the site exists in the first place. On the flip side, you have the modern realities of international tourism, state-sponsored economic growth, and aggressive commercialism. It begs the question, can you really have quiet, undisturbed meditation while thousands of tourists are lining up outside a massive resort next door? Well, the state government actually leaned pretty hard into that second vision. They packaged the new image of Bodh Gaya, blended it with traces of its ancient past, and used it to rebrand the entire state of Bihar through their Incredible India campaign. Officials started promising massive, game-changing infrastructure. We're talking 1,000-room luxury hotels, golf resorts, and huge transit links designed to handle upwards of 1 million tourists a year. Basically, they viewed the peaceful image of Buddhism as the perfect tool to attract serious global capital.
Let's get into Section 4, the buffer zone battle.
This is where things really collide. When global mandates hit local streets, sparks fly. 1 kilometer. That single number represents a highly contested UNESCO buffer zone radius proposed around the Mahabodhi Temple. To meet international heritage guidelines and protect both the physical and spiritual integrity of the complex, authorities proposed drawing this strict 1 kilometer circle around it, where modernization would be heavily restricted. To enforce this zone, authorities drafted a master plan, and let me tell you, the restrictions were severe. Within this 1 kilometer radius, absolutely no new commercial or religious structures would be allowed. The plan also called for the clearing of what the state officially labeled vacant lands, the demolition or closure of select existing shops, and highly regulated movement for visitors. They were essentially trying to freeze development right dead in the middle of a booming, densely populated economic center. Now, it's really vital that we understand both sides here, because neither is entirely wrong. Conservationists and government officials passionately argue that these rules are literally the only way to save a priceless world treasure from unmitigated destruction. They say if you don't control the sprawl, the temple's sanctity is lost forever. However, local residents genuinely fear that this top-down zoning will completely destroy their everyday livelihoods. To them, the land isn't vacant, it's where they live, it's where they run their shops, it's where their families have survived for generations. As you can probably imagine, this tension didn't just stay on paper, it boiled over into the streets. In May 2005, a massive 2-day protest erupted as shopkeepers, landowners, and everyday citizens pushed back hard against the proposed master plan. It highlighted the incredibly difficult, messy reality of superimposing international, sterilized heritage rules over a living, working, and breathing community.
Finally, Section 5, preserving the sacred future.
So looking ahead, how on earth do we balance this overwhelming demand for tourism infrastructure with ecological survival and the spiritual sanctity of the site? The reality is that managing a place like this requires complex, ongoing ecological efforts that go way beyond just protecting old bricks. For instance, researchers have had to thoroughly document hundreds of local plant species just to protect biodiversity, especially the sacred peepal trees. And think about all those new 1,000-room luxury hotels. Because local freshwater resources are notoriously inconsistent, modern sustainability practices are forcing these hotels to rigorously filter and recycle their water, just to flush their toilets. At the same time, authorities are constantly battling to regulate new construction, so the visual majesty, the actual vista of the temple, isn't just swallowed up by a sea of concrete. And you know, for a lot of devotees, there is some very real, deep-seated anxiety about all of this. They fear that this relentless push for global capital, the building of nearby golf resorts, and the general secularization of the area will permanently erase the temple's authentic aura. There's this huge fear that tampering with the timelessness will inevitably turn a profound spiritual center into just another crowded commercial theme park. As Bodh Gaya navigates the super complex future, it leaves us with a really big question. Can a sacred site truly belong to the whole world without losing its soul? Is it possible that the very act of preserving a spiritual home for humanity, packaging it and managing it for millions of people, might inevitably change what made it holy in the very first place? It's a fascinating paradox of preservation that we are all watching play out in real time. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this gives you a whole new lens through which to view our shared global heritage.